December 7th, 1941, 1430 hours. Imperial Navy Ministry, Tokyo. Vice Admiral Shimada Shigetaro reviewed the latest intelligence reports with satisfaction. His staff had compiled comprehensive assessments of American submarine strength. The numbers seemed almost reassuring. The Americans have 111 submarines total, he announced to the assembled officers. Perhaps 50 are modern fleet boats. The rest are obsolete S-class vessels from the Great War. Of these, they can maintain perhaps 15 to 20 on patrol at any given time in our waters. Commander Miwa Shigeyoshi, chief of the submarine section, nodded in agreement. Our intelligence indicates they lack the industrial capacity to significantly expand this force during wartime. Submarine construction is complex and time-consuming. We estimate they might add 30 vessels over 3 years of war. These assessments, meticulously recorded in the Naval Ministry's secret intelligence summaries, would prove to be catastrophically wrong. By war's end, the Americans would deploy not 140 submarines to the Pacific, but 288 fleet submarines, with over 180 operational simultaneously at peak deployment. The story of how Japanese naval intelligence completely failed to anticipate, recognize, or acknowledge American submarine construction represents one of the war's most consequential intelligence failures. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Japanese naval intelligence had built its assessments on seemingly solid foundations. Pre-war observations of American shipbuilding capacity appeared comprehensive, methodical, and thorough. Naval attachés in Washington had toured Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, and Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California. They had photographed facilities, interviewed managers, reviewed published production statistics, and observed construction methods, firsthand. Captain Yokota Minoru, naval attaché in Washington from 1939 to 1941, filed detailed reports that became the foundation for all subsequent Japanese assessments of American submarine production capacity. His evaluation, declassified after the war, reflected the confident analysis of an experienced naval officer who believed he understood exactly what he was observing. American submarine construction capacity is limited by specialized facilities and skilled workforce requirements. Electric Boat can produce approximately 8 to 10 submarines annually. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, perhaps 6. Mare Island, another 4 to 6. Total annual production, 20 to 24 submarines maximum, assuming no competing priorities. Yokota's report continued with supporting detail that seemed to confirm his conclusions. He noted the small number of specialized welders capable of submarine pressure hull work, the limited number of construction ways at each facility, the complex testing and qualification procedures, and the lengthy training period required for submarine construction workers. Each observation was accurate, each supported his fundamental conclusion, and each would prove catastrophically misleading. This analysis suffered from fatal flaws that would haunt Japanese intelligence throughout the war. Japanese observers had failed to grasp the scalability of American industrial methods. They had seen peacetime construction and assumed wartime capacity would expand linearly, perhaps doubling or tripling at most. They could not envision the transformation American industry would undergo. The first flaw was temporal. Yokota observed American submarine construction in 1939 to 1941, when yards operated on peacetime schedules with peacetime funding, peacetime workforce sizes, and peacetime urgency. He saw construction as it existed, not as it could become. When he noted that Electric Boat employed approximately 2,400 workers in submarine construction, he failed to consider that this number could expand tenfold given sufficient motivation and resources. The second flaw was conceptual. Japanese industrial philosophy treated specialized military construction as fundamentally different from mass production. Warships, especially submarines, required master craftsmen whose skills took years to develop. This belief was deeply embedded in Japanese naval culture. Yokota therefore assumed American submarine production would remain constrained by workforce expertise, never imagining that Americans would revolutionize the training process itself. The third flaw was cultural. Japanese observers projected their own limitations onto American industry. Japan's industrial base, while sophisticated, was smaller and less flexible than America's. Japanese shipyards couldn't dramatically expand capacity because they lacked the broader industrial ecosystem to support such expansion. Yokota assumed American yards faced similar constraints. What made this intelligence failure particularly tragic was that indicators of American industrial flexibility existed for those willing to see them. American automotive production had already demonstrated the nation's capacity for rapid industrial transformation. In the 1,930 seconds, American car manufacturers had repeatedly proven they could retool factories, retrain workers, and scale production up or down based on demand with remarkable speed. Japanese naval observers had access to this information. They read American industrial journals, they toured American factories. But they never connected automotive production flexibility to potential military production capacity. The conceptual leap from making cars to making submarines seemed too vast. In Japanese thinking, military production belonged to a completely different category of manufacturing. Captain Yokota's report included a telling paragraph that revealed this blind spot. American automotive production techniques are impressive in scale, but irrelevant to naval construction. The precision, quality control, and specialized knowledge required for submarine construction cannot be mass-produced. Each pressure hull must be individually crafted to exacting specifications. This fundamental reality limits American submarine production, regardless of their general industrial capacity. This assessment would prove spectacularly wrong. By 1943, Americans were applying automotive production principles directly to submarine construction with devastating effectiveness. The most fundamental flaw in Japanese pre-war intelligence was the assumption that peacetime observations could predict wartime capabilities. Yokota had observed Electric Boat in 1940 when the yard was building submarines at a leisurely pace, with a single shift, limited overtime, and no particular urgency. From this, he extrapolated maximum capacity. He failed to consider what the yard might achieve with 3 shifts working around the clock, with unlimited funding, with national priority for materials and workers, with government-sponsored training programs, and with the motivation that comes from existential war. When Yokota noted that Electric Boat had 6 submarine construction ways and estimated each could produce 1 submarine every 18 to 24 months, his mathematics seemed sound. 6 ways, producing 1 boat every 2 years each, yielded approximately 3 to 4 boats annually per way, or roughly 18 to 24 boats total. He added similar calculations for other yards and arrived at his estimate of 20 to 24 submarines annually. What he never imagined was that construction time itself would be slashed through improved methods, that new construction ways would be added, that entirely new yards would be built, and that the 18 to 24-month construction cycle would eventually shrink to under 10 months. Japanese intelligence compounded their miscalculation by comparing American capacity to their own. Japan's shipbuilding industry could expand wartime submarine production by perhaps 75% over peacetime levels. This seemed like the natural limit of possibility. If Japan, with its tradition of naval construction and its focused industrial planning, could achieve 75% expansion, surely the Americans could do no better. This comparison ignored fundamental differences in industrial base size. Japan's entire 1,941 industrial production roughly equaled that of the American state of Ohio. When both nations attempted industrial expansion, Japan was pushing its entire economy to maximum capacity, while America was tapping a fraction of its potential. Commander Fujimori Yasuo, who worked in economic intelligence, later admitted this conceptual failure. We understood America had larger economy than Japan. We calculated it was perhaps 3 to 5 times larger. We failed to understand that this size difference meant they could expand military production while maintaining civilian economy. We squeezed every resource for military production and assumed they must do the same. We never grasped that they could build unlimited submarines while simultaneously producing automobiles, refrigerators, and consumer goods. This was incomprehensible to us. Perhaps most damaging was how Japanese pre-war analysis became self-fulfilling prophecy. Once Captain Yokota's estimate of 20 to 24 submarines annually became accepted doctrine, all subsequent intelligence was filtered through this framework. Evidence that supported the estimate was accepted. Evidence that contradicted it was rejected or reinterpreted. When neutral sources reported American submarine commissioning ceremonies, Japanese intelligence checked the reports against their expected production rate. If reports showed 3 submarines commissioned in a month exceeding the expected rate of 2 per month, the excess was dismissed as misidentification, propaganda, or reporting error. This created an intelligence trap from which Japanese naval headquarters never escaped. Their pre-war estimate became the lens through which all wartime intelligence was viewed. The estimate prevented them from seeing reality even when evidence accumulated overwhelmingly. Underlying all these failures was a fundamental misunderstanding of American industrial philosophy. Japanese observers saw American workers as less skilled than Japanese craftsmen, American management as less detail-oriented than Japanese supervisors, and American construction methods as less precise than Japanese techniques. From this perspective, Japanese industry represented the peak of quality and efficiency. If Japan could only produce a certain number of submarines given their superior methods, surely America with inferior methods could produce no more. This assessment inverted reality. American industrial methods weren't inferior, they were different, optimized for scalability rather than individual craftsmanship. Japanese methods produced exquisite individual products through labor-intensive processes. American methods produced good enough products through systematic processes that could be endlessly replicated and expanded. In submarine construction, good enough proved more than adequate. American fleet submarines were perhaps less beautifully finished than Japanese boats, but they were just as effective operationally and could be produced in vastly greater numbers. The Japanese never understood that industrial war rewards scalability over perfection. Some Japanese observers did recognize the danger. Captain Nakamura Katsumi, who studied American industry in the late 1930s, filed a prescient warning in 1940. American industrial capacity operates far below potential in peacetime. Their methods prioritize flexibility and scalability over current output. In war, they could expand production geometrically rather than arithmetically. We must not judge their wartime capacity by peacetime observation. Nakamura's report was filed and forgotten. It contradicted prevailing assessments and was therefore dismissed as alarmist. By the time events proved him correct, it was far too late. The foundation of Japanese miscalculation about American submarine numbers was laid years before Pearl Harbor, built on observations that seemed comprehensive but were fatally flawed. These pre-war intelligence failures created a framework of understanding that persisted throughout the war, preventing Japanese leadership from ever accurately assessing the submarine force they faced. The Americans didn't just build more submarines than Japan expected, they built more submarines than Japan thought possible, and that impossibility was calculated years before the first torpedo was fired. Japanese naval intelligence divided submarine threats into rigid categories that shaped all future analysis. On the surface, this system appeared to represent methodological sophistication and analytical rigor. In practice, it became the mechanism through which Japanese leadership systematically undercounted American submarine strength throughout the entire war. The classification hierarchy was deceptively simple. Category A: confirmed operational submarines, vessels positively identified through multiple independent sources, with verified hull numbers, command information, and operational history documented through at least 2 separate intelligence streams. Category B: probable submarines, intelligence suggesting construction or deployment, typically from single-source reporting, radio intercepts indicating new call signs, or reports from field commanders lacking photographic or documentary confirmation. Category C, possible submarines, unconfirmed reports requiring verification, including isolated contact reports, second-hand intelligence from neutral sources, or signals intelligence suggesting but not confirming new submarine activity. This classification system, ostensibly designed for analytical precision, created systematic undercounting that persisted from 1942 through war's end. The architecture itself guaranteed that Japanese intelligence would always lag months or years behind American submarine deployment reality. The fundamental flaw lay in the confirmation requirements. Japanese doctrine demanded multiple confirmations before upgrading assessments. A submarine had to be photographed, encountered in combat, or identified through multiple intelligence sources before counting as confirmed. This standard, appropriate for peacetime intelligence assessment, became catastrophically inadequate during rapid wartime expansion. The requirement for multiple confirmations meant that submarines could conduct entire patrol cycles, departing American bases, crossing the Pacific, attacking Japanese shipping, and returning home without ever being upgraded from possible to confirmed. Commander Nakamura Katsuji, who worked in the intelligence evaluation section throughout the war, explained the rigid methodology in post-war testimony that revealed both the logic and lunacy of the system. We received reports of submarine contacts constantly. Our classification system prevented us from accepting these at face value. If patrol boat reported submarine contact, we listed it as possible until confirmed by second source. Often that confirmation never came because the submarine departed the area. We maintained conservative estimates believing this represented professional rigor. Nakamura's explanation captures the essence of the failure. What Japanese intelligence called professional rigor was actually systematic reality denial. The demand for second source confirmation made sense when submarines were few and slow deploying. It became absurd when facing rapid deployment of dozens of new boats monthly. This professional rigor meant Japanese intelligence was always counting submarines that had been positively identified months or even years earlier, never accounting for the new boats continuously entering service. The temporal lag between submarine deployment and Japanese confirmation created a widening gap that reached absurd proportions by 1944. Consider a typical example from mid-1943. USS Harder SS-257 was commissioned on the 2nd of December 1942 at Electric Boat. She departed for her first war patrol from Pearl Harbor on the 7th of June 1943. During this patrol, she attacked Japanese shipping, fired torpedoes, and returned successfully. Japanese intelligence classification timeline for Harder: December 1000, 942 May 1000, 943. No classification. Japanese intelligence unaware of vessel's existence. June 1943, listed as possible, based on single radio intercept of new call sign July 1943. Upgraded to probable after convoy escort reported submarine contact matching characteristics October 1943. Confirmed as Category A after photographs from neutral source showed submarine with SS-257 hull number in port. By the time Harder was officially confirmed in Japanese intelligence estimates, she had completed 2 war patrols and was preparing for her third. Meanwhile, 15 additional submarines had been commissioned that Japanese intelligence hadn't yet detected. The system guaranteed Japanese intelligence was always analyzing the past, never the present. They were counting submarines from 6 months ago while facing submarines commissioned last week. The classification system created bureaucratic bottlenecks that prevented rapid assessment updates. Each submarine's upgrade from one category to another required formal review, documentation, and approval from senior intelligence officers. Lieutenant Commander Ishida Saburo, who worked in the submarine tracking section, described the cumbersome process. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When we received intelligence suggesting a new submarine, we would open a file. That file moved through evaluation stages. First, analysts assessed reliability of source. Then, they cross-referenced against existing intelligence to see if this represented a new vessel or was duplicate reporting of known submarine. Next, they determined appropriate classification. Finally, senior officers reviewed and approved. This process required minimum 2 weeks, often 6 weeks. By the time we classified a submarine as probable, it might have completed a patrol and returned to base. The bureaucratic lag compounded the confirmation lag. Even when intelligence arrived suggesting new submarine deployments, the processing time meant that information was dated before it entered official estimates. Making matters worse, Japanese intelligence doctrine mandated conservative interpretation of ambiguous evidence. When analysts faced uncertainty about whether intelligence indicated one submarine or two, they were instructed to count it as one. When radio intercepts suggested possible new submarine call signs, analysts were told to assume it might be existing submarines using multiple identities. This conservative approach, designed to prevent overestimation, guaranteed systematic underestimation during periods of rapid enemy expansion. Every ambiguous case was resolved in favor of lower numbers. Commander Matsumura Hideaki, senior analyst in the submarine section, explained the rationale that trapped Japanese intelligence in perpetual undercounting. We operated under principle that overestimating enemy strength was more dangerous than underestimating. If we overestimated, we might waste resources preparing for threats that didn't exist. If we underestimated, we would simply fight harder with existing resources. This philosophy worked when enemy strength was stable. It failed catastrophically when enemy was rapidly expanding. The logic was precisely backwards. Overestimating submarine numbers might have prompted Japan to allocate more resources to anti-submarine warfare, convoy escorts, and defensive measures. Underestimating ensured Japan remained unprepared for the actual threat level. Beyond the classification, categories themselves, Japanese intelligence employed a sophisticated evidence evaluation system that systematically discounted reports suggesting higher submarine numbers. Intelligence sources were ranked by reliability. Tier 1. Photographic evidence, captured documents, signals intelligence with confirmed decryption. 2. Multiple independent field reports, neutral diplomatic sources with technical expertise. Tier 3. Single field reports, neutral press accounts, prisoner interrogations. Tier 4. Rumor, unverified third-hand reports. Speculation. The system seemed reasonable. The application was not. Reports from Tier 3 and Tier 4 sources were effectively ignored even when accurate. Multiple Tier 3 reports suggesting the same information, such as several convoy escorts, independently reporting different submarines in the same operational area, were not aggregated into higher confidence. Each was treated separately and individually dismissed as unconfirmed. This meant that Japan could receive 10 separate reports of submarine contacts from 10 different commanders in the same month, and classify all 10 as unconfirmed possible contacts, rather than recognizing them as evidence of 10 different submarines. The classification system also created a file maintenance problem that prevented accurate accounting. Each confirmed submarine had a dedicated intelligence file, tracking its movements, attacks, and status. These files were meticulously maintained for submarines in Category A, but submarines in Category B and C had only minimal files, often just initial report summaries. When submarine was eventually confirmed and upgraded to Category A, analysts would discover that multiple probable and possible reports had all referred to the same submarine. The redundant files would be consolidated, reducing the count. However, the reverse situation where single probable report actually represented multiple different submarines was never discovered because submarines in lower categories weren't tracked with sufficient detail to reveal such errors. Lieutenant Yamada Kenji, who managed submarine tracking files, recalled the systematic bias. When we consolidated duplicate files for same submarine, we congratulated ourselves on preventing overcounting. When we later discovered that single report we'd dismissed had actually represented multiple submarines we hadn't detected, we had no mechanism for going back and correcting our estimates. The system was designed to catch overcounting errors, but blind to undercounting errors. By 1943, the classification system had acquired psychological importance beyond its analytical function. Japanese intelligence officers had invested years in building the system, training analysts in its use, and defending its methodology. Acknowledging that the system was producing catastrophically wrong results would require admitting professional failure. Captain Ui Toshikazu, who supervised intelligence analysis, described the institutional commitment to failed methodology. We had built our careers on this classification system. We had written manuals, trained subordinates, briefed senior commanders based on its outputs. When evidence began suggesting our counts were wrong, we couldn't simply abandon the system. That would mean admitting we had been feeding commanders incorrect intelligence for years. Instead, we defended the system and questioned the evidence. The classification system had become more important than accuracy itself. Maintaining methodological consistency mattered more than confronting reality. When American occupation forces provided actual submarine deployment data in late 1945, Japanese intelligence officers faced devastating revelation. Their elaborate classification system, their careful confirmation procedures, their conservative interpretation principles, all had produced estimates that were off by 40–50%. Even worse, the temporal lag meant their most current estimates were actually counting American submarine strength from 12 to 18 months earlier. In August 1945, Japanese intelligence reported 200 to 220 American submarines based on their classification system. This represented approximately accurate count of American submarines in service in early 1944. Commander Nakamura, whose testimony opened this section, delivered the final judgment on the classification system he had helped operate. We built a system designed for precision in counting known quantities. We used it to track rapidly expanding unknown quantities. The system couldn't adapt because adaptation would require admitting the system was wrong. We chose methodological consistency over accuracy, procedure over truth. The classification system didn't fail because it was badly designed. It failed because it was perfectly designed for the wrong problem. We needed flexibility and rapid assessment. We had rigor and confirmation requirements. We counted carefully while drowning in submarines we refused to count. The intelligence categories that seemed to represent analytical sophistication had instead created systematic blindness that persisted until Japanese defeat, made accurate counting irrelevant. By mid-1942, evidence of expanded American submarine deployment was mounting across every theater of Pacific operations, yet Japanese naval intelligence systematically dismissed it all. What made this dismissal particularly significant was that the evidence wasn't subtle or ambiguous. It was overwhelming, mathematical, and impossible to explain within the framework of Japanese pre-war estimates. American submarines were appearing in unexpected numbers across the Pacific. The operational reports painted a picture that should have forced immediate reassessment. Japanese forces in the South Pacific reported 8 to 12 submarine contacts monthly around Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, and New Guinea. Forces in the Central Pacific reported similar numbers near the Marianas, Carolines, and Marshall Islands. The Philippines garrison reported constant submarine activity off Luzon and Mindanao. The home islands' defense forces logged regular submarine contacts in Japanese coastal waters. Simple mathematics suggested the Americans were deploying far more than 20 submarines simultaneously. If submarines were being encountered at these rates across 5 or 6 distinct operational areas, separated by thousands of miles, the only logical conclusion was that dozens of submarines were operating concurrently. Yet Japanese intelligence maintained their assessment that only 15 to 20 American submarines could operate in forward areas at any time. This wasn't denial of subtle intelligence. This was denial of basic arithmetic. Captain Mayazumi Haruki, intelligence officer for the combined fleet, recorded his growing concerns in his diary, a document that survived the war and provides extraordinary insight into the internal debates within Japanese intelligence during 1942. His entry from June 1942 captured the cognitive dissonance perfectly. Commander Shimada insists American submarine activity levels are consistent with pre-war estimates of 15 to 20 boats on patrol. I calculate we have recorded 47 separate submarine contacts this month across our operational areas. Either American submarines are impossibly mobile, or there are more of them than we acknowledge. Mayazumi's frustration was evident in subsequent entries. On the 3rd of July 1942, he wrote, "Presented analysis to Commander Shimada showing geographic distribution of submarine contacts makes 15 to 20 boat estimate untenable. Submarines reported simultaneously in waters 3,000 miles apart. Shimada suggested we are over-reporting contacts, that nervous crews are reporting same submarines multiple times. I asked how same submarine could be reported off Rabaul and off Midway on same day. He had no answer, but maintained official estimate. By August 1942, Mayazumi's tone had shifted from questioning to bitter resignation. We are lying to ourselves. The contact reports are clear. The Americans have deployed at least 40 to 50 submarines in forward areas. Headquarters refuses to acknowledge this. I fear we are building strategy on comforting fiction rather than uncomfortable truth." Mayazumi's concerns were overruled at every level. The official assessment remained unchanged. American submarine strength stable at approximately 110 to 115 boats total, with 15 to 20 on forward patrol. The reality? By July 1942, the United States had 135 submarines in commission, with 73 assigned to the Pacific Fleet. Construction was accelerating rapidly, with 8 submarines completed in the first half of 1942 and production increasing monthly. The gap between Japanese estimates and American reality was already substantial and widening daily. More significantly, American submarine deployment strategy had evolved beyond Japanese comprehension. The Japanese calculated patrol capacity based on traditional deployment ratios: 1 submarine on patrol, 1 in transit, 1 in refit. This suggested that 15 submarines on patrol implied 45 total submarines in theater, already above Japanese estimates of Pacific Fleet submarine strength. But American submarine operations didn't follow these traditional ratios. Enhanced logistics support, forward basing at Pearl Harbor and Australia, improved maintenance procedures, and aggressive command philosophy meant American submarines spent more time on patrol and less time in port than Japanese calculations assumed. The Pacific Fleet's 73 submarines were maintaining 25 to 30 boats on patrol simultaneously, nearly double the Japanese estimate. What made Japanese denial particularly inexplicable was the geographic distribution of submarine contacts. Even if Japanese intelligence refused to accept that more submarines existed, simple geography should have forced acknowledgement that more were deployed. In June 1942 alone, Japanese forces recorded submarine contacts in the following locations on the same dates: the 15th of June 1942, 2 submarine contacts off Truk, Central Pacific, 1 submarine contact near Rabaul, South Pacific, 1 submarine contact off Saipan, Marianas, 1 submarine contact in Philippine Sea, June 23, 1942, submarine contact off Kwajalein. Marshalls. Submarine attack on convoy near Palau, submarine sighting off Tokyo Bay, submarine contact near Guadalcanal. The distances between these locations ranged from 1,500 to convoysos, 3,000 miles. Even if every contact represented the same highly mobile submarines repeatedly encountered, the transit times made this explanation absurd. A submarine couldn't be off Truk and Guadalcanal on the same day. It couldn't attack near Palau and appear off Tokyo within hours. Lieutenant Commander Tanaka Raizo, who compiled operational contact reports, attempted to map submarine movements based on Japanese intelligence estimates. His analysis, included in a July 1942 report to Naval General Staff, demonstrated the mathematical impossibility. If American submarine patrol strength is 15 to 20 boats as estimated, then reported contact patterns require submarines to transit at average speeds of 45 to 60 knots continuously. No submarine possesses such capability. Therefore, either contact reports are grossly exaggerated or substantially more submarines are operating than we acknowledge. I can find no evidence supporting systematic over-reporting of contacts. Tanaka's report was filed without action. The official estimate remained unchanged. When confronted with the mathematical and geographic impossibilities, Japanese intelligence headquarters offered explanations that explained nothing. Explanation 1. Over-reporting by nervous crews. This couldn't account for contacts confirmed by multiple ships, contacts involving actual attacks, or contacts in widely separated geographic areas. Explanation 2. Submarines operating with unprecedented aggression. Expectations, but refused to consider that numbers also exceeded expectations. Explanation 3. Temporary surge in deployment. By December 1942, this temporary surge had lasted 6 months. Explanation 4. Improved American submarine performance. This posited that better submarines were achieving more contacts per boat. While American submarines were indeed improving, this couldn't explain simultaneous contacts in distant locations. None of these explanations withstood scrutiny. All served the same purpose: maintaining the pre-war estimate regardless of contradictory evidence. The resistance to revising submarine estimates in 1942 reveals how institutional momentum can override evidence. Japanese intelligence had built their Pacific war planning on specific assumptions about American submarine strength. Revising those assumptions in mid-1942 would require acknowledging that war planning was based on flawed intelligence. This had cascading implications. If American submarine numbers were wrong, what else might be wrong? If intelligence had fundamentally misassessed American submarine production capacity, had they also misassessed American naval construction, aircraft production, or industrial capacity generally? Commander Fujimori Yasuo, who worked in production intelligence, later explained the institutional paralysis. By mid-1942, some of us recognized American submarine numbers exceeded estimates. But acknowledging this meant acknowledging systemic intelligence failure. It meant telling commanders that operational planning based on our intelligence was flawed. It meant admitting to superior officers that their pre-war assessments were wrong. The institutional cost of revision seemed greater than cost of maintaining estimates we suspected were incorrect. This calculus that institutional embarrassment outweighed operational accuracy condemned Japanese forces to fight the entire war based on intelligence estimates known to be wrong by mid-1942. The tragedy of 1942 was that Japan still had time to adapt. The war was young. American submarine deployment, while exceeding Japanese estimates, hadn't yet reached the overwhelming levels of 1,943 to 1,944. Had Japanese intelligence acknowledged reality in mid-1942 and revised their assessments, Japan could have accelerated anti-submarine warfare programs, increased convoy escort production, implemented comprehensive convoy systems earlier, allocated more resources to submarine defense, developed more realistic operational planning. Instead, by maintaining comfortable fiction through 1942, Japanese leadership ensured they would face the 1943 submarine onslaught completely unprepared. Captain Miyazumi, whose diary documented the denial, wrote a final bitter entry in December 1942. 12 months of war, hundreds of submarine contacts, thousands of tons sunk, and official estimate remains 15 to 20 American submarines on patrol. We are not fighting the Americans, we are fighting our own refusal to see them clearly. The Americans are winning not because their submarines are better though they are, but because we refuse to count them accurately. How can we defeat an enemy we refuse to acknowledge? 1942 established the pattern of denial that would persist through war's end. Evidence would accumulate, mathematics would demonstrate impossibility of official estimates, individual officers would recognize the truth, and institutional momentum would override all contrary evidence. By December 1942, the United States had commissioned 26 additional submarines during the year, bringing total commissioned submarines to 161, with 95 assigned to Pacific operations. Japanese intelligence acknowledged 115 total American submarines, with approximately 20 on patrol. The gap was already enormous. It would only grow wider. And the pattern established in 1942, mathematical evidence ignored, geographic impossibility explained away, individual dissent overruled, institutional estimates preserved would ensure that gap widened into chasm. The first warnings came in 1942. They were comprehensive, mathematical, and irrefutable. They were also completely ignored. That ignorance would cost Japan the war. What Japanese intelligence failed to anticipate was the industrial mobilization that transformed American submarine production from a specialized craft into mass production. In December 1941, American shipyards were building submarines at pre-war peacetime rates. By January 1943, submarine production had increased 400%. New construction facilities had opened. Workforce training programs graduated thousands of specialized workers. Assembly methods were revolutionized with modular construction techniques. The numbers were staggering: 1,942, 26 submarines commissioned 1,943, 55 submarines commissioned 1,944, 81 submarines commissioned 1,945, 32 submarines commissioned through August, total 194 new submarines entered service during the war, far exceeding Japanese predictions of 30 to 40 boats over 3 years. Yet, Japanese intelligence never revised their fundamental assessment of American production capacity. Commander Fujimori Yasuo, who analyzed American production throughout the war, testified about the institutional resistance to new data. We received reports of submarine commissioning ceremonies from neutral sources. We had intelligence suggesting massive shipyard expansion. Radio intercepts indicated many more submarine call signs than our estimates suggested existed. Each piece of evidence was individually dismissed as unreliable, exaggerated, or misinterpreted. We never assembled the complete picture because doing so would require admitting our foundational estimates were wrong. By 1943, the mathematical impossibility of Japanese assessments should have been obvious to anyone examining the data objectively. Japanese forces across the Paleochalsthasari arcs, Pacific recorded submarine contacts at unprecedented levels. Southwest Pacific, 60 to 80 submarine contacts monthly. Central Pacific, 40 to 60 contacts monthly. Philippine Sea, 30 to 50 contacts monthly. Home waters, 20 to 30 contacts monthly. Even accounting for multiple forces reporting the same submarine, the contact numbers implied at least 60 to 80 submarines operating simultaneously in forward areas. Japanese intelligence acknowledged only 35 to 40 American submarines on patrol at peak deployment. The discrepancy was explained through increasingly creative reasoning. Submarines were moving with impossible speed between operational areas. American deception operations were creating phantom submarine contacts. Japanese forces were over-reporting encounters. Lieutenant Commander Tanaka Yahachi, a statistical analyst in the Naval General Staff, attempted to force recognition of the contradiction. I prepared a detailed analysis in April 1943, demonstrating that reported submarine activity levels required minimum 70 submarines on forward patrol, suggesting total Pacific submarine strength of at least 180 to 200 boats. My report was rejected. I was told American submarines were operating with unprecedented aggression, creating impression of greater numbers than actually existed. Tanaka's estimate of 180 to 200 submarines in the Pacific by mid-1943 was remarkably accurate. Actual strength: 175 submarines assigned to Pacific commands. Japanese intelligence's rigid classification system prevented them from acknowledging submarine proliferation even when evidence accumulated. Each submarine had to be individually confirmed and assigned a tracking number before counting in intelligence estimates. This worked adequately in 1942, when American submarine deployments were indeed limited. By 1943, the system had collapsed under the weight of new deployments. The intelligence section maintained detailed files on each confirmed American submarine: construction date, commissioning, commanding officer, estimated capabilities, patrol history, and fate. These files were meticulous and generally accurate for submarines confirmed pre-1943, but the system couldn't adapt to rapid deployment of new submarines. By the time intelligence confirmed a new submarine's existence through the required multiple sources, that submarine might have completed 2 or 3 patrols and been replaced by newer boats entering service. Commander Matsumura Takehiko, who worked in submarine tracking, described the systemic failure. "We were always several months behind reality. Our confirmed submarine count represented boats we had identified through laborious verification processes. By the time we upgraded submarine from probable to confirmed, 3 more had entered service we hadn't detected yet. We were tracking history, not current strength." The appearance of coordinated submarine wolfpack tactics in mid-1943 should have forced recognition that American submarine numbers had dramatically increased. Japanese naval doctrine understood that wolfpack tactics required substantial submarine forces to implement effectively. Yet, when wolfpacks began decimating Japanese convoys, intelligence analysis focused on tactical implications while ignoring the strategic revelation. The Americans had enough submarines to deploy 3, 4, or even 5 boats to single convoy intercepts, while maintaining pressure across the entire Pacific. Captain Oi Atsushi analyzed wolfpack tactics for the Naval General Staff. The American wolfpack operations suggest coordination between 3 to 5 submarines per attack group. We have identified 8 to 10 separate wolfpack operations occurring simultaneously across different operational areas. This implies minimum 24 to 50 submarines deployed in wolfpack formations alone, plus additional boats on independent patrols. The mathematics require substantially more submarines than our current estimates suggest. Oi's analysis was filed without action. The official submarine estimate was not revised. Perhaps the most damning evidence of Japanese intelligence failure came from their own radio intelligence operations. Japanese radio monitoring stations tracked American submarine radio traffic throughout the war. They identified individual submarine call signs, monitored communications patterns, and analyzed operational deployments through signals intelligence. By late 1943, Japanese radio intelligence had identified over 150 distinct American submarine call signs operating in the Pacific theater. This alone should have confirmed that American submarine strength far exceeded official estimates. Lieutenant Commander Ishida Shiro, who worked in communications intelligence, documented the contradiction. "Our radio intelligence section maintains tracking files on 167 separate American submarine radio call signs active in Pacific operations. Our naval intelligence section estimates total American submarine strength at 140 boats, with 40-50 inches the Pacific. The discrepancy is never explained. When I raised this issue, I was told many call signs were probably deception, with single submarines using multiple identities. The notion that American submarines were systematically using multiple call signs for deception was unsupported by evidence. It was simply the only explanation that allowed Japanese intelligence to maintain their estimates while confronting contradictory radio intelligence. By 1944, American submarine deployment reached its wartime peak. The statistics were overwhelming. Total submarines in commission: 232 submarines assigned to Pacific, 180+ submarines on patrol simultaneously, 70 to 100 new submarines entering service, 6 to 7 monthly. Japanese naval intelligence acknowledged 160 total American submarines, approximately 50 on Pacific patrol. The gap between reality and recognition had become a chasm impossible to rationalize, yet rationalize they did. The Naval General Staff's monthly intelligence summary for June 1944 stated, "American submarine activity remains intensive across all operational areas. Estimated 45 to 55 submarines on forward patrol. Total American submarine strength assessed at 155 to 165 boats. Construction rate estimated 3 to 4 submarines monthly. Actual construction rate 6.75 submarines monthly average for 1,944. Japanese intelligence did receive accurate reports of American submarine construction. Neutral diplomats, intelligence operatives, and analysis of American press reports provided detailed information about submarine commissioning ceremonies, shipyard expansions, and construction programs. These reports were systematically discounted. A May 1943 intelligence summary noted, "Neutral sources report American claims of 8 submarines commissioned in April. This exceeds our assessed maximum production capacity of 24 annually. Report assessed as propaganda exaggeration." The report was accurate. 8 submarines were indeed commissioned in April 1943. Commander Takagi Sakai, who evaluated intelligence from neutral sources, explained the dismissive approach. "We received frequent reports of American submarine commissioning from various sources. Many included specific details, submarine names, commissioning dates, specifications. We categorically dismissed most as either American propaganda or neutral source misidentification of other vessel types. We had determined maximum American production capacity was approximately 2 submarines monthly. Reports exceeding this were automatically suspect." This circular reasoning, dismissing accurate intelligence because it contradicted flawed estimates, ensured Japanese assessments never corrected themselves. Perhaps most remarkably, Japanese intelligence obtained actual photographic evidence of American submarine expansion and still maintained their denial. Intelligence operatives in neutral countries photographed American submarines in port, at shipyards, and during transit through neutral waters. By 1944, Japanese files contained photographs of dozens of American submarines that did not appear in official strength estimates. These photographs were categorized as unconfirmed pending additional intelligence. The submarines photographed were clearly marked with hull numbers, but Japanese intelligence insisted on additional confirmation before adding them to official counts. Captain Nakamura Jichi, who reviewed photographic intelligence, testified, "We had photographs of American submarines with hull numbers SS-300 through SS-320. Our official estimates acknowledged only submarines through SS-260. Rather than accept that 60+ additional submarines existed, we questioned photograph authenticity, suggested hull numbers might be deceptive, or insisted submarines were still under construction despite photographic evidence of operational status. The cognitive dissonance required to dismiss clear photographic evidence revealed how deeply Japanese intelligence was committed to maintaining their original assessments regardless of contrary evidence. The failure to accurately assess American submarine numbers had direct operational consequences. Japanese convoy planning assumed submarine encounters would be relatively rare based on estimated submarine deployment density. Escort allocations, routing decisions, and defensive preparations all reflected the assessment that only 40 to 50 American submarines patrolled Pacific waters. Reality: 70 to 100 submarines on patrol simultaneously, meant convoys encountered submarines 2 to 3 times more frequently than Japanese planning anticipated. Escort forces were consistently inadequate for the actual threat level. Captain Matsuyama Mitsuharu, who commanded convoy escorts, recorded the disconnect. Headquarters assured us submarine encounters remained infrequent based on enemy submarine deployment levels. Our experience contradicted this daily. Every convoy encountered multiple submarines. When I reported this, I was told we were simply unlucky to encounter such concentrated enemy activity. After the 5th convoy battle in 6 weeks, I stopped reporting. They didn't want to hear truth. Only in the final months of the war did Japanese intelligence begin acknowledging the scale of American submarine deployment, and even then, their estimates remained conservative. A Naval General Staff assessment from April 1945 finally revised American submarine strength upward. Current intelligence suggests American submarine strength may reach 200 to 220 boats, with 80 to 100 operating in forward areas simultaneously. This represents significant increase over previous estimates. The assessment was dated April 1945. By that time, actual American submarine strength was 268 boats, with the final 20 submarines of the war program under construction. Even in defeat, Japanese intelligence underestimated by 40 to 50 submarines. When American occupation forces provided Japanese naval officials with accurate data on American submarine deployment, the reaction was stunned disbelief followed by defensive rationalization. Admiral Toyoda Soemu, final commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, reviewed the American submarine deployment figures in October 1945. I was shown documentation proving Americans deployed 288 submarines to Pacific operations during the war, with over 180 operating simultaneously at peak. I had been told throughout the war we faced perhaps 140 submarines total, with 40 to 50 on patrol. The Americans achieved this production increase while simultaneously fighting in Europe, building massive surface fleets and supplying allies globally. It was inconceivable to us that such production was possible. Captain Ui Atsushi, the naval staff officer who had repeatedly questioned official submarine estimates, delivered a bitter assessment. We had the intelligence, we had the evidence. We refused to believe it because accepting it would require accepting that American industrial capacity exceeded our comprehension. We maintained comfortable fiction that we understood American capabilities, when reality so exceeded our estimates that acknowledging truth meant acknowledging we never understood our enemy at all. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.